The word landed in the middle of a summer garden, under a white canopy of roses gone soft and heavy in the heat, and for one full second Theo Marek forgot how to breathe. "My fiancé, Vivian Hale," said again, louder this time, her hand closing around his forearm the way a person grips a railing over a long drop. "Theo, we still haven't set a date." Around them the reception went on, the clink of glasses, a string quartet sawing through something bright, the low hum of 200 people in linen and silk, pretending not to sweat. But the small knot of faces in front of them had stopped. A woman with a champagne flute halfway to her mouth. A silver-haired man whose smile froze at the corners. And beyond them, near the cake, a groom in a pale gray suit who had turned very slowly at the sound of Vivian's voice. This was not the deal. Theo knew the deal. He had read the deal, initialed the deal, folded the deal into the inside pocket of a rented jacket that was, at this exact moment, sticking to his back. The deal said date. The deal said escort. The deal said nowhere, in any clause, the word she had just dropped into a rose garden like a lit match. Her fingers pressed harder. "Say something," the pressure said. Theo smiled at the frozen faces. "We're terrible at picking dates," he heard himself say. "We keep arguing about the season. And that, more or less, is where I have to stop and go backward. Because none of this makes sense unless you understand that 6 days earlier, I did not know Vivian Hale's first name. 6 days earlier, the city was in the grip of the first real heat of the summer, and the lobby of the Hale and Vance building was the only cool place on the block that would let you in without an appointment. That was mostly because of me. I ran the little espresso bar tucked between the elevators and the wall of frosted glass, 8 feet of walnut counter, 1 temperamental machine, and a chalkboard I updated every morning in handwriting my mother would have called a crime. I liked the mornings best. The marble held the nights cool a little longer, and the light came in low and gold across the floor. And for about 40 minutes I had the whole cathedral of that lobby to myself before the tide of lanyards came through the doors. "Iced oat flat white," said Nadia, appearing at my counter at 7:52 the way she always did, sunglasses still on. "And whatever moral support costs today." "Moral support's on the house." I pulled the shot and watched it run dark and even. "You're early. That's a bad sign. It's a catastrophic sign." Nadia was Vivian Hale's assistant, which meant she knew where every skeleton in a 40-floor building was filed, and she carried the knowledge like a woman balancing a full tray on a moving train. She slid onto the stool. "Do you know what today is?" "Tuesday. Today," she said, "is the day the invitation gets confirmed. RSVP deadline. Marcus Vance is getting married on Saturday, and my boss has to stand in a garden and clap for it." She lifted the sunglasses at last, and her eyes were tired. "The whole industry will be there, Theo. Everyone who ever whispered that Hale and Vance fell apart because she couldn't hold a partner. And she's going alone." I set the ice drink on the walnut and slid it 2 inches toward her, which is the only comfort I know how to give a stranger before 8 in the morning. Vance, as in the name on the building, as in her ex, as in the man whose name she paid a fortune to keep buying out of, 1 letter at a time. Nadia wrapped both hands around the cup. They started the firm together. He left. He took half the clients and a decorator named Chloe. And now there's a wedding with a harpist and a signature cocktail, and Vivian would rather chew glass than walk in without someone on her arm, but she won't ask a single human being she knows, because if she asks, they'll know she needed to ask. The elevator chimed. Nadia stood so fast the stool wobbled. "That's her floor," she said. "You didn't hear any of this. You're a barista. You're basically furniture." She took a long pull of the drink and softened. Good furniture. The best furniture. I'd marry this coffee. I laughed, and I thought that was the end of it, a sad piece of gossip about a woman I'd only ever served in silence, a black Americano, no sugar, exact change on the counter so she'd never have to touch my hand. I turned back to my chalkboard and rewrote the day's special and did not think about Vivian Hale at all. That lasted until 6:40 that evening. By then the lobby had emptied and gone blue with dusk, and I was breaking down the machine, forearms wet to the elbow, when the elevator opened and she stepped out alone. Vivian Hale in a charcoal suit, heels clicking across the marble like a countdown, a leather folio pressed flat against her chest. She was not walking toward the doors. She was walking toward me. I straightened up too fast and cracked my head on the shelf. "We're closed," I said, rubbing my scalp. "But if you need an Americano to survive whatever's up there, I can. I don't want coffee." She stopped at the counter. Up close she was younger than the myth of her, and more tired, and there was a small crease between her brows that no amount of tailoring could iron flat. She set the folio on the walnut and squared it to the edge, then squared it again, though it hadn't moved. "You're Theo. Marek, you've had this concession for 3 years. You're current on your lease, and you have no complaints on file with building management. That's a strange thing to have looked up." I look everything up. Her eyes came to mine. They were the gray of the lobby floor at 7 a.m. "I have a proposition, and it is going to sound insane, so I'm going to say it quickly, and you're going to let me finish before you laugh." The ack hummed. Somewhere above us a floor buffer whirred and went quiet. I dried my hands slowly on the towel at my waist, and I felt the callus at the base of my thumb catch on the cloth, and I did the thing I always do when a moment gets too big. I reached for something small and true to stand on. "I never laughed before I've heard the whole price," I said. "Go on." Something in her face flickered, surprise, maybe, that I hadn't already backed toward the door. She opened the folio. Inside, in a plastic sleeve, was a cream-colored invitation with a gold vine curling around 2 names, and the sight of it seemed to cost her something to look at. "On Saturday there is a wedding," she said. "It is 90 minutes north at a vineyard, and it will be full of people I have spent 10 years out working, and none of them liking. I need to walk in with a date. A convincing one. Someone charming and unremarkable enough that no one there will recognize him, and quick enough not to embarrass me." She closed the folio. "I will pay you generously for 1 afternoon and evening of your time. You attend as my guest, you are pleasant, you leave when I leave, and on Monday we never speak of it. That's the arrangement." For a moment I just looked at her. Outside, the streetlights had come on, and the heat still shimmered up off the sidewalk, and a bus sighed past the glass. "Why me?" I asked. "You run a company. You know 1,000 people in nicer jackets than I own. That's exactly why not them." She said it flat, but her thumb moved to the edge of the folio and pressed there, white. "Everyone I know keeps score. If I bring a colleague, it's a story by Monday. If I bring a friend, a small pause, and I understood suddenly that the pause was the whole sentence. I bring you because you have no reason to talk, no one to tell, and you make people comfortable. I've watched you do it every morning for 3 years. You make this entire lobby feel like it's about to be all right." Her jaw tightened, as if she hadn't meant to say that last part. "It's a skill. I'm buying it for a day." The number she named then was more than my cart cleared in 2 good months. It was rent and the dentist I'd been avoiding and the small cushion I never let myself keep. It should have been the easiest yes of my life. "No," I said. She blinked. I don't think people said no to Vivian Hale very often. It seemed to genuinely reset her. "No, Not for the money. I hung the towel on its hook. I've spent a long time building something that's just mine, this counter, this 8 feet of the world where nobody owns me. You want to rent me for a day and hand me a script. I'd be lying to a garden full of strangers so they'd think better of you. I shook my head. I'm not good at lying. Miss Hale, I turn red. My ears give me away. You'd be paying a fortune for the worst actor at the party. She should have gathered the folio and gone. Instead, she stood very still, and the tiredness in her face cracked open just wide enough for me to see straight through it, and what was on the other side was not pride at all. He told everyone I was impossible to be with, she said quietly. For a year, I've eaten it, and on Saturday, I have to hand him a gift and wish him well, and let 200 people watch my face while I do it. Her voice didn't shake. That was almost the worst part, how level she kept it, like a woman reading terms off a contract. I'm not asking you to lie about me. I'm asking you to stand next to me so that for one afternoon, the story isn't only theirs. The cicadas were loud through the glass now, that thick summer drone that means the day won't cool for hours yet. I thought about my mother, who used to say, the loneliest people in the world are the ones who've learned to never look it. I thought about the way Vivian squared a folio that was already square. One condition, I said, and watched hope arrive in her eyes before she could stop it. I don't do a script. If I'm going to stand next to you, I stand next to the real thing. You tell me who you actually are on that drive, no rehearsed lines, and I'll fill in the rest like a person and not a hired suit. And if anyone asks how we met, I gestured at the walnut between us, we tell them the truth. You buy your coffee here. We just leave out that today's the first day you learned my name. For the first time since she'd stepped off the elevator, the crease between her brows eased. That's 2 conditions. I'm bad at math. It's the coffee. It keeps me up. I put out my hand across the counter, the hand she had spent 3 years arranging exact change to avoid. Saturday. Deal. She looked at the hand a moment too long. Then she took it, and her grip was cool and firmer than I expected, and I felt the small tremor she was working very hard to hide. Deal, said Vivian Hale. She was gone before I could ask a single one of the 40 questions that arrived the second the door swung shut behind her, like whether 90 minutes north was long enough to turn 2 strangers into anything a wedding would believe, and why I had said yes to the one thing I'd promised myself I'd never do again, which was let someone else write me into their story. Thursday, she sent a car for the fitting, which was the first sign that Vivian Hale's idea of a favor and mine were not the same size. I'd pictured a rack of jackets and a tape measure. Instead, the car took me to a narrow shop where a tailor named Aldo circled me in silence, tucking and pinning, while a fan pushed the hot afternoon around the room, and the whole place smelled of steam and wool and the sharp green of the basil growing on the windowsill. Vivian sat in the corner in a slice of shade, phone in hand, running the fitting like a board meeting. "Not the black," she said, without looking up. "He'll look like a waiter." "The blue." "The blue," Aldo agreed, and vanished behind a curtain. "I heard that," I told her. "Look like a waiter." Some of us are proud members of the pouring class. Her thumb paused over the screen. "I didn't mean. I know what you meant." I turned to catch myself in the long mirror, a stranger in half-pinned blue looking back. "Relax. I've been underestimated by better-dressed people than a vineyard full of designers. It's practically my cardio." That earned me something rare, the corner of her mouth moving, just barely, before she smoothed it away like a wrinkle in a cuff. "You'll need to be able to do that on Saturday," she said. "Not take the bait. These people bait beautifully. They'll ask what you do. I'll tell them I run the best espresso bar in the city. They'll hear that you're not one of them." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "Then they'll relax. Nobody guards themselves around the help. You want to know everything about a room, Miss Hale. Stand behind a counter in it for a while." Aldo returned with the blue, and I shrugged into it, and the fit was so clean it startled me, like the jacket knew something about my shoulders I hadn't been told. There, now I look like a man who could ruin a woman's reputation at a garden party. She stood and crossed the small room and stopped in front of me, close enough that I caught the faint dry cedar of whatever she wore. She reached up and, without asking, straightened my collar, a brisk, impersonal touch, the kind you'd give a picture hanging crooked. But her fingers slowed at the last second, and I felt them there, warm through the wool, a half-beat longer than the task required. "His name is Marcus," she said, very quietly, to the caller and not to me. "When you meet him, you won't like him. You'll want to say something clever. Don't. He collects other people's cleverness and wears it later as his own." She stepped back, and the moment closed like a drawer. "Just be exactly what you were tonight. Kind, unbothered. It undoes him more than anything sharp could." "Vivian," I said, her first name, out loud for the first time, and I watched it land. "Can I ask you something you'll hate?" Her chin came up. "That's the only kind of question I trust. Did you love him?" The fan turned. The basil trembled on the sill. Out in the street, a scooter buzzed past and faded, and for a moment she looked not like a CEO at all, but like any person standing in a hot little room being asked the one thing they'd built a whole company to avoid answering. "I built something with him," she said at last. "I've stopped being able to tell the difference between loving a person and refusing to lose to them. That's the honest answer, and if you repeat it, I'll deny it and fire you from a job you don't hold." She picked up her bag. The armor was back on, every buckle. "Aldo will have the jacket pressed by Saturday. Be ready at 10. And Theo," she paused at the curtain, "thank you for not laughing. On Tuesday. I thought you would." Then she was gone again, and I stood in a borrowed blue jacket that fit too well, in a room that smelled of steam and basil, understanding for the first time that this was going to be much harder than pretending, because the woman I'd agreed to invent a story about had just, without meaning to, told me a true one. Saturday came up hot and cloudless, the kind of summer morning where the light has weight. The car pulled out of the city and into the hills, and the world went from concrete to vineyard, so gradually I didn't notice the exact moment the horizon turned green and combed into rose. Vivian sat beside me in the back seat, in a dress the color of storm cloud silk. And for 90 minutes she did the thing she'd promised. She told me who she actually was. Not the Ursum, the real Ledger. That she'd grown up in a house where affection was a performance review. That she'd never learned to be liked, only to be needed, and had built a company on the difference. That she still, at 38, kept a spare key to an apartment she'd shared with no one in years, because a locked door you can open yourself is the only kind she trusts. I gave her back small true things in return, because a story you carry alone gets heavier, and because I'd promised no scripts. By the time the vineyard gates appeared, wrought iron flung open, valets in white shirts, the whole sun-drunk lawn beyond it strung with lights not yet lit. We knew enough about each other to be dangerous. "Ground rules," she murmured as the car slowed. Beyond the glass, cicadas roared in the olive trees, and the smell of cut grass and warm stone rolled in through the vents. We arrived together. We're new. You're private about your work because you value discretion. You do not confirm anything. You do not deny anything. You let me steer. Her hand found the door handle and gripped it. And whatever happens in there, however it looks, you follow my lead. Can you do that? I said I would. I looked at her, at the crease between her brows that had deepened all morning, at the pulse ticking fast in her throat above the storm-gray silk. "Vivian, breathe. It's a garden and some cake. You've survived worse before breakfast." She almost smiled. The valet opened her door. The heat and the noise and the string quartet came pouring in, and Vivian Hale stepped out onto the gravel and became, in the space of one exhale, entirely someone else, spine straight, chin level, a woman who had never needed anyone in her life. I came around and offered my arm. She took it, and I felt her fingers dig in through the blue wool, that same hidden tremor from the counter, and we walked up the lawn together into a wedding full of people whose whole afternoon was about to become a story they hadn't planned to tell. They saw her before they saw me. Heads turned in that smooth, terrible way a crowd turns, glasses lowering, conversations folding shut. A path opened toward the rose canopy without anyone appearing to move. And at the end of it, beside a 3-tiered cake and a bride in ivory laughing at something over her shoulder, stood a man in a pale gray suit who looked up, saw Vivian, and let a slow, practiced smile spread across his face like he'd been waiting all day for exactly this. Marcus Vance. Name on the building. He came toward us with his arms slightly open, the harpist behind him spilling silver into the heat, and every single guest on that lawn leaned in half an inch to watch. Vivian, his voice was warm and carrying, pitched for the audience. "You came. I truly wasn't sure you would." His eyes slid to me, quick and assessing, cataloging the jacket, the unfamiliar face, filing me under nobody in the space of a blink. "And you brought a friend." I felt Vivian's whole body go still against my arm. This was the moment. Date, escort, +1. This was the word we'd rehearsed the shape of the entire drive. The small, unremarkable word that would let her walk through this garden with her head high. "Not a friend," Vivian said. Her hand tightened on my forearm like she was steadying herself over a long drop. She turned her face up to the 200 people pretending not to listen, and her voice, when it came, was perfectly, catastrophically clear. "My fiancé." The harp played on. Somewhere a champagne flute stopped halfway to a mouth. And I stood in a borrowed blue jacket in the middle of a summer garden, smiling at a groom whose smile had just gone to glass, understanding all at once that the deal I'd folded into my pocket had just been torn up, and that whatever I said in the next 3 seconds, there would be no walking back out through that iron gate the same man who'd walked in. "We keep arguing about the season," I said, and I let a rueful warmth into it. The tone I use on a customer who's ordered wrong and doesn't want to feel foolish. She wants autumn. I keep telling her nobody looks good in a photograph they're shivering in. For one held breath, nothing moved. Then the woman with the frozen champagne flute laughed, a bright, involuntary sound, quickly muffled, and the whole knot of faces exhaled at once, the tension breaking into a scatter of murmurs. A fiancé who complained about wedding dates was ordinary. Ordinary was safe. Ordinary meant there was nothing here to feast on, and I watched 200 people decide, in the space of that laugh, to be a little disappointed. Marcus did not laugh. His smile stayed exactly where it was, pale and even, but something behind his eyes had gone to work. Recalculating, he'd walked toward us with a script of his own, and I had just watched me tear up his the way Vivian had torn up mine. "A fiancé," he said. He turned the word over like a stone he was checking for cracks. "Well, congratulations are in order, then, to both of us." He spread his hands to take in the lawn, the lights, the cake behind him. "Though I confess I'm hurt, Viv. All these years and I read about your engagements in the trades. Now I don't even get an announcement. You get to watch, Vivian said pleasantly. I thought that would suit you better. The silver-haired man beside the cake made a small noise into his glass. Marcus's jaw ticked just once, and then the bride was there, ivory silk, bare-tanned shoulders. A laugh she wore like jewelry, sliding her arm through his and looking up at us with the frank curiosity of a woman who had won and could afford to be gracious. You must be Vivian. Her voice was soft and unhurried, a decorator's voice, trained to make expensive things sound like your idea. I'm Chloe. I've heard. A delicate pause, a smile. So much. Only the good parts, I'm sure. Vivian's hand was still locked on my arm, but her voice didn't so much as tilt. It's a beautiful setting, Chloe. You have a wonderful eye. Everyone always said so. The compliment landed like a coin dropped down a well. You heard it going, and you never quite heard it hit. Chloe's smile held, but something crossed her face. The brief, flat second of a person who suspects she's been complimented on the one thing she took. Thank you, she said. We wanted it to feel personal. She turned the full warmth of her attention on me, and I felt myself catalogued the way Marcus had catalogued me, only slower, more thorough. And you are? Theo. I offered my hand. I'd say I've heard a lot about you too, but honestly, Vivian's been very disciplined. She hardly talks about the past at all. I smiled. I've had to piece the whole legend together from other people. It was the right amount of nothing. Chloe took my hand. Hers was cool, ringed, a decorator's grip that told you nothing, and her eyes moved once more over the blue jacket. And I saw her reach the same conclusion Marcus had. Not one of us. She filed it, and she was too well-bred to let the file show, but I'd stood behind a counter for 3 years, and I know the exact shape a face makes when it's decided you don't matter. Well, Chloe said, you'll want a drink. It's brutal out here. Marcus, darling, they're calling you for photographs. She steered him a quarter turn with the ease of a woman who had learned exactly how to move him, and over his shoulder Marcus let his gaze rest on Vivian one beat too long. Not warm, not cold, but weighing, the look of a man revising a plan he'd thought was finished. We'll talk, he said. It wasn't to me. Then they were gone into a swirl of a photographer and someone's aunt. And Vivian's grip on my arm finally, slightly, loosened. Walk, she breathed, toward the tables. Now and slowly, like we have nowhere to be. We walked. The lawn tilted gently down toward long tables under an arbor, and the grass gave way to a gravel path that crunched under her heels, and the smell of it all came at me in layers, cut grass baking, the sugar and butter breath of the cake. Warm stone from the low walls, and under everything the green mineral tang of the vines going on for acres in the heat. A waiter passed with a tray, and Vivian lifted 2 glasses of something pale and cold without breaking stride, and pressed one into my hand. Don't drink it, she murmured, smiling at no one. Hold it. It gives your hands something honest to do. Vivian, I kept my own smile up for the benefit of a passing cluster of guests. We need to talk about the word. I know. The word was not in the deal. I know. The deal said date. I have the deal. It's in my pocket. It's getting damp, but it's legible. Theo, you handed me a script an hour ago on the drive, and then you set it on fire in front of 200 witnesses. I steered us behind a flowering hedge into a pocket of shade where the noise dropped by half and the cicadas took over. A thick pulsing wall of sound in the olive trees. I turned to face her, and I kept my voice low and even, because I've learned that the quietest voice in a fight is the one people strain to hear. Talk to me. What just happened up there? She didn't answer, right away. She looked out over the vines, and the crease between her brows was a canyon now, and her thumb was moving against the cold curve of the glass in exactly the way it had moved against the edge of the folio. Pressing, whitening. The one tell her tailoring couldn't hide. "He was going to do it first," she said finally. "You didn't see it, because you don't know him. But I watched him line it up, the open arms. The you brought a friend. The pity. He was going to introduce me to that entire lawn as the woman who came alone in all but name, the sad plus one, the colleague she dragged along." Her jaw set. "He's done it before. At the spring gala, he told a room I'd brought my accountant for company. It went around for a month. I could feel him reaching for the next one, and she stopped. The glass turned in her fingers. I took the word away from him. I made it mine first. It was the only weapon in reach. So you promoted me. So I overcorrected. A breath. Spectacularly, yes. Vivian, do you understand what you've done?" I set my untouched glass on the low wall, because my hands had stopped needing something honest to do and started needing to gesture. A date I could have walked out of. On Monday, I'm furniture again. You're a black Americano exact change, we never speak of it. That was the whole beautiful architecture of the thing. But a fiancé, I said the word like it was a hot pan, a fiancé has a story. A fiancé has a ring that isn't there. A proposal somebody's going to ask about. A wedding date I just told a laughing woman we argue over the season for. A fiancé gets Googled. Vivian, by Monday, your ex's entire wedding is going to want to know who I am. The color moved up her throat. She wasn't a woman who was often caught short, and I could see the cost of it in the way she held herself very straight, as if posture could substitute for a plan. "I'll fix it," she said. "How?" "I don't know yet. I fix things." "It's the one thing I've always," her voice caught, just barely, on the edge of a sentence she didn't finish, and she looked away from me, out at the burning green rose. And for a second, the CEO was gone, and there was only a tired woman in storm gray silk who had just realized she'd cornered herself in front of the exact audience she'd spent a year armoring against. "I panicked," she said, "and it clearly cost her the way a splinter costs you, small and deep." "There," I panicked. "Is that what you need to hear?" I stood in front of him, and I could not be the thing he was about to make me. So I made myself something else, and I didn't think about the man attached to the arm I was holding, and that was, she turned back and met my eyes, and the honesty in her face was almost hard to look at. That was unforgivable, and I'm asking you to forgive it anyway. Because if you drop my arm and walk to that gate right now, he wins the whole afternoon, and I will never, ever get the word back. The cicadas roared. A burst of laughter carried over the hedge from the photographs. Somewhere a cork left a bottle with a soft, festive report, and the sound was absurdly cheerful against the things standing between us in the shade. I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about my counter. My 8 feet of the world, the promise I'd made myself never to let anyone write me into their story again. And I thought about the tremor I could still feel where her fingers had gripped my arm, the tremor she was working so hard to keep out of her voice. "One afternoon," I said. "That was the deal. Not an engagement, Vivian, an afternoon. When the sun goes down on this vineyard, whatever we told these people, it ends. We drive home, and on Monday you figure out how to unengage from a man you were never engaged to, and I go back to being furniture, and we agree that today was the strangest thing either of us has ever done." I held out my hand the way I had across the counter. "Get me through the toasts. That's all I can promise. The toasts. and then were gone. Relief flooded her face so fast she couldn't stop it, and I understood that she genuinely thought I might leave. That in her ledger, people left, that was simply the entry that always came next. She took my hand. Her grip was cold from the glass and firmer than it needed to be. "The toasts," she agreed. "And Theo, thank you." "Again, you're going to run out of ways to make me say it. I'll never run out. I own the coffee. You'll be back Tuesday." That got the corner of her mouth, the real one, the one she smoothed away too fast. But before she could, a voice cut into our pocket of shade, bright and delighted, and absolutely the last voice I wanted to hear. "Theo? Theo Marek?" I turned, and my stomach dropped straight through the gravel. Coming around the hedge with a plate of canaps in one hand and a look of pure holiday joy on her face was a woman I knew. Really knew, not lobby knew. A regular from 2 summers back, a graphic designer named Priya, who'd bought a cortado from me 4 mornings a week for the better part of a year, and told me about her sister's divorce and her allergy to hazelnuts and her plan to quit the agency and go freelance. Which, judging by the linen dress and the wedding guest glow, she had done. "It is you." She beamed, and then her eyes went to Vivian, to me, to the 2 of us tucked behind a hedge, and the beam took on a wattage that made my ears go hot. "Oh my God, are you here with... how do you 2? She pressed the back of her canap hand to her chest. "I didn't know you knew Marcus and Chloe." Small world. Tiny world. "Are you working the event? Please tell me you're doing the coffee. This crowd is dying for a decent. He's not working the event," Vivian said. She said it lightly, smoothly, but I felt her go still beside me, and I watched her do the calculation in real time. Priya, who I knew, who knew what I was, who was now standing in the fault line between the lobby and the lie. Priya blinked. "Oh, then, Theo's my fiancé," Vivian said. And there it was again, the word, dropped a second time into a garden, and this time I watched it land on the one person in the entire vineyard equipped to know exactly how impossible it was. Priya's face did a slow, wonderful thing, surprise, calculation. And then, God help us all. "Delight, Priya looked at me. At the jacket. At Vivian. At me again. "Theo? The Theo? Coffee cart Theo is engaged to Vivian Hale?" She laughed, a real laugh, and lowered her voice to a stage whisper that carried directly through the hedge. "How on earth did that happen? You never said a word. 4 cortados a week for a year, and you never... Oh, this is the best thing I've heard all summer." "It's very new," I said. "It's very new," Vivian echoed. "It's so new," Priya agreed, thrilled, and I understood with a sinking clarity that she was not going to let this go. That a barista and a billionaire was, to Priya, a story so delicious she would be telling it at brunches for a decade, and that every retelling was a lit fuse under whatever fragile thing Vivian and I had just agreed would end at sundown. "We have to catch up. God, we have to catch up. I want the whole thing. Where's your table?" "I'm going to find you at dinner, and I want the entire story, start to finish, no editing, Priya. I put every ounce of the counter into it. The warmth, the gentle redirect I use on a customer holding up a line. It's so good to see you. It really is. Find us at dinner. I'll tell you everything." I would tell her nothing. But go. Chloe was looking for people to fill the front rows for photos, and you do not want to miss free vineyard Prosecco. Trust me, I know these things. You always did. She squeezed my arm as she went, still glowing. Already, I could see it, composing the text to her sister. "Coffee cart Theo. Unbelievable. Congratulations, you 2. You're adorable. It's disgusting. Then she was gone around the hedge, and the shade was quiet again except for the cicadas and the far-off pop of another cork, and Vivian and I stood looking at each other with the exact expression of two people who have just watched a small fire jump a firebreak. "She knows you," Vivian said. "She knows me. 2 summers of cortados. She knows I run a cart, she knows I'm broke, she knows I've never once mentioned dating a CEO. I dragged a hand down my face. Vivian, she is going to tell everyone. Not to be cruel, that's a story people tell. By the toasts, half this garden's going to know your fiancé pulls espresso for a living." And here is the thing I did not expect. I braced for Vivian to flinch, to do the throat color thing, to reach for a fix, to unravel 1 degree further. Instead, something in her face changed, hardened into a shape I hadn't seen yet, and it took me a second to recognize it because it was so unlikely in that moment. It was a smile. A small, cold, extraordinary smile. "No," she said slowly. "No, let her." "What?" "Let her tell them." Vivian's eyes had gone bright, the tired canyon between her brows smoothing as a plan assembled itself behind them. "Think about it, Theo. What's the worst thing they can say? That Vivian Hale, who Marcus told the whole industry was too cold, too driven, too impossible to love, that Vivian Hale is marrying a man who makes strangers feel like the lobby's about to be all right. A man with no agenda, no shares, nothing to gain." The smile sharpened. "You're not a liability. You're the best answer I could have possibly given him." He wanted them to see a woman who couldn't hold a partner. Let them see one who chose a man who doesn't care what she's worth. I stared at her. "You want to lean into it." "I want to survive dinner," she said. "And you just handed me a better lie than the one I could invent." Then, quieter, the brightness dimming into something more careful. "But it only works if you're all right with it. That's the part I keep, that's the part I forgot before, up there. It's your name, they'll be saying. So I'm asking, this time. Before, not after." She squared her shoulders. "Will you be my fiancé through dinner?" Not the arm. The story, the whole thing. The cicadas surged and fell. Behind the hedge the quartet had given way to the harpist again, silver notes spilling into the heat, and I thought about how I'd walked into this garden promising myself the toasts and nothing more, and how the toasts kept getting further away. "Through dinner," I said, "but I want it on the record that I am the worst possible person you could have picked to keep a secret." I turn red. "My ears, your ears give you away. You mentioned." For the first time all day, she let the smile stay. "Then we'll have to keep you away from the questions you can't answer. Stay close. Follow my lead, I know. It's practically my job title now." I offered my arm again, and she took it, and as we came out from behind the hedge into the full weight of the afternoon sun, I felt the tremor in her fingers had eased, replaced by something steadier, and, if I was honest, a little frightening, which was resolve. We had made it perhaps 10 steps back toward the tables when the silver-haired man from the cake stepped smoothly into our path. Up close, he was older than he'd looked from a distance, 70 at least, with a linen jacket that had cost more than my machine, and a pair of pale, patient eyes that moved over me with none of Chloe's discretion and all of Marcus's calculation, times 10. Vivian, his voice was dry as the gravel underfoot. "You've been hiding in the shrubbery. Very unlike you." "Gerald, something in Vivian's arm went rigid against mine. I didn't realize you were on the guest list. Marcus and I mended fences last winter. He came to understand where the smart money sits." The old man's mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "As, I imagine, will you eventually. It's the only thing that ever really sits in the end." His eyes came back to me, and they did not blink. "You haven't introduced your companion." "Theo Marek," I said, and put out my hand, because I'd rather offer a hand and have it ignored than stand there being weighed. "Good to meet you." He looked at my hand. He did not take it. He looked at it the way you look at a bill you're deciding whether to dispute. And then he looked back up at my face with an interest that was somehow worse than rudeness. "Marek," he repeated. "I don't know the family, which tells me there isn't one worth knowing. What is it you do, Miss Marek?" And Vivian, beside me, drew a breath to answer, to steer, to shield, to do the things she'd told me twice now to let her do. But Gerald's pale eyes were fixed on me and not on her, and I had spent 3 years learning that the surest way to lose a room is to let someone else answer the question that was asked of you. So before she could get the word out, I smiled at the old man, the counter-smile, the unbothered one, the one Vivian had said undoes them more than anything sharp, and I said, "I make coffee." The silence that followed had a texture. I could hear the harp and the far pop of a cork, and Vivian not breathing beside me. Gerald's expression didn't change, but something moved in the back of those pale eyes, a small door opening onto a very cold room. "How charming," he said, "and unusual. Vivian Hale, who built a 40-floor firm buying a man's name off her own front door, one letter at a time, engaged to a boy who pours coffee in the lobby." He let it sit, savoring the shape of it, and I understood all at once that this was not a man who would tell the story at brunches like Priya. This was a man who would use it. "You know," he said, almost gently. I sat on the board that watched Marcus leave. "I've known you since you were an ambitious girl with something to prove and no idea how much it would cost you." His gaze slid, deliberate, to Vivian. "I'd have thought you, of all people, would understand that a woman in your position does not marry down. She gets swallowed. People will assume he's after the firm. And people," he added, turning to go, "are so rarely wrong about these things." He didn't wait for an answer. He drifted back toward the tables with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never once in his life been the last to leave a room, and Vivian and I stood in the middle of the sun-struck lawn, with his words settling over us like ash. "That," Vivian said, very quietly, "was Gerald Vance. Vance, as in Marcus's uncle, the largest single outside investor in Hale and Vance. The man whose signature I need on a refinancing package in 11 days, or the loan that's holding my expansion together, comes due all at once." Her voice was level, but I could feel her hand shaking again through the wool, and this time it wasn't the small hidden tremor. This was something colder. "I didn't know Marcus had gotten to him. I didn't know he'd be here." She turned to me, and the resolve of 5 minutes ago had a crack running through it now, fine and deep. "He controls whether my company survives the summer, Theo, and I just introduced him to a fiancé who told him, to his face, that he makes coffee." Above us the strung lights flickered on all at once, though the sun hadn't nearly set, someone testing the switch. And for a moment the whole lawn glittered falsely, a party lit for a darkness that hadn't come. Across the grass, near the cake, I saw Marcus Vance watching us. He had a champagne flute in one hand and his uncle's ear in the other, the old man's head tilted toward him, and as I watched, Marcus said something low, and Gerald laughed, and both of them looked, at the very same moment, directly at me. "Vivian," I said slowly, not taking my eyes off the two of them, "I don't think we get to leave at sundown." She followed my gaze. She saw what I saw, the uncle and the ex, heads together, a plan being poured between them as smoothly as the wine. "No," she said, "I don't think we do." For a moment neither of us moved. The false lights hummed overhead. 100 little bulbs burning against a sky that was still the flat blue-white of late afternoon. and the whole lawn glittered like a stage set waiting for its dark. Across the grass, Marcus said something else, and Gerald nodded, slow and satisfied, the way a man nods when a figure finally reconciles at the bottom of a column. "Look away," I told her quietly. "Both of them are watching to see if we flinch. Don't give them the flinch." She turned her face to me instead, a small, deliberate pivot, and made herself smile at whatever I might be saying. Up close, I could see the pulse still going in her throat, quick above the storm gray silk. "You said it," she murmured through the smile. "You told him you make coffee. He asked me what I do. I make coffee." I wasn't going to build a fake law degree in front of a man who audits people for sport. I lifted the untouched glass off the low wall and pressed it back into her hand, closing her cold fingers around it. "Hold this. Give your hands something honest to do. Somebody taught me that about an hour ago, and it turns out she was right." The smallest breath of a laugh got out of her before she could stop it, and I felt some of the rigid line go out of her arm. A waiter drifted past with a tray of little pastry cups, and the smell came with him, warm butter. Something with time. The sugar-heavy exhale of the cake still standing in the sun, and under it the green mineral tang of the vines rolling off toward the hills in long-combed rows. "He's going to use it," she said. "Gerald, he doesn't repeat things. He deploys them. By Monday, he'll have decided what a coffee cart fiancé means for the risk profile of a woman he's about to lend 9 figures, and he'll price it in, and he will never once say the word coffee out loud in a meeting. He'll just find that the numbers have changed. Then we change what it means before he decides." I steered us a quarter turn, slow, 2 people admiring the view of nothing. "Right now, he thinks you brought a nobody because you were desperate. That's the story he's pouring into Marcus's ear. So we make me a nobody you chose. On purpose, with your eyes open. There's a version of a man who makes coffee that terrifies a man like Gerald, and it's the version who doesn't want anything." She studied me. The crease had come back between her brows, but it had changed character, less a wound now, more a mind at work. "You've thought about this before. Being underestimated. You have a whole philosophy. I have a cart in a lobby and a lot of time between the morning rush and lunch." I shrugged. "You learn to read a room from behind a counter or you go out of business. Right now this room's decided I'm harmless. Harmless is the most useful thing a person can be at a party full of people who guard themselves. They put down the guard. And then they tell you everything." A bell sounded somewhere near the arbor, a bright little run of notes, and a young man in a white shirt began moving through the crowd, murmuring that dinner was served if everyone would find their cards. The tide of linen and silk began to turn toward the long tables, glasses lifting, laughter rising a notch the way it does when people are about to be told where to sit. Vivian set her jaw and lifted her chin, and the CEO came back over her like a tide coming in. "They'll have seated us," she said. "Chloe did the cards herself. I'd stake the firm on it, which means wherever we're placed, it's a message." She slid her arm through mine, and I felt her fingers find their grip. Whatever it says, we read it out loud, and we smile. Follow my lead, I know. It's stitched into the jacket now. She almost smiled again, and we walked up the gentle rise toward the tables, into the smell of cut grass baking and the first thin thread of wood smoke drifting from somewhere the caterers had hidden a grill. And I felt her hand tighten 1 degree with every step closer to whatever Chloe had decided we deserved. "The card," said the head table. I understood the message the second I saw it. Not the exile of a distant table by the caterer's tent, which is what a cruel woman would have done. Chloe was cleverer than cruel. She had put us at the long table under the arbor, the family table, 3 seats down from the bride and groom, in full view of every guest on the lawn, and directly across from Gerald Vance. It was the seat of honor and the seat of the accused, both at once. She wanted us close. She wanted us lit. She wanted 200 people to watch Vivian Hale eat dinner an arm's length from the man who'd left her, with a coffee cart fiancé at her elbow, all night long. Well, I said under my breath, pulling out Vivian's chair, she's good. She's very good. Vivian sat with the spine of a woman lowering herself onto a throne. Smile at Gerald. He's already seated. He was, directly opposite, unfolding his napkin with the unhurried care of a man who had all the time in the world and knew it. Those pale eyes lifting to take us in over a low arrangement of white roses and trailing ivy. Beside him sat a woman his own age in pearls, and beside her an empty chair, and then 3 seats along, the bride and groom's places still waiting for the photographs to release them. And on my other side, sliding into her seat with a plate she'd clearly negotiated her way toward, wine already poured. Eyes already shining, Priya. They sat me at the family table. She whispered, thrilled, leaning into me so her shoulder pressed mine. Me. I designed Chloe's studio branding 2 years ago. That's the whole connection. And I'm up here with the Vances because half the real family didn't fly in. Theo. I'm sitting next to the groom's people and coffee cart Theo, engaged to a Titan. And nobody up here knows it's the most insane sentence ever constructed. This is the best wedding I have ever been to, and the salads haven't even come. Priya, I kept my voice down and warm. I need you to do something for me. Anything. I'm so in. I need you to be a little discreet. Her face fell about 1 millimeter, then rallied. Discreet. Right? Because it's new. Because she glanced across at Gerald, at the pearls, at the whole watching table, and something quicker moved behind the delight. Priya had quit an agency to go freelance, and you don't survive that without learning to read a room too. Because these are her people, and they'd love a reason. Got it. She mimed a zipper across her lips, then immediately unzipped it to add. But at some point tonight, you are telling me the real version, off the record, freelancer to barista, or I will actually perish. When the toasts are done, I said, I promise. He never keeps that promise, Vivian said mildly from my other side, not looking up from her menu card. He told me he'd tell me everything on the drive up, and I still don't know his middle name. It's a good middle name. I'm saving it. I felt something settle a half-inch in my chest, absurdly at the fact that she'd played along, that she'd heard my private thing with Priya and reached across it to build the lie 1 more brick higher, easily, like a woman passing me a tool. Across the roses, Gerald watched us do it, and I made sure to let him see me smile at her like a man who had a middle name worth saving. Vivian, Gerald's dry voice reached across the ivy. I was just telling Margaret how long I've known you. Since the beginning. Since the little office on the 4th floor with the one window that didn't open. He turned to the woman in pearls. She used to work until the cleaners came. Ferocious, we all said she'd either build something remarkable or burn straight through the middle of her own life doing it. And which did I do, Gerald? Vivian asked pleasantly, unfolding her napkin. The night's young, he said, and smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd seen all day. The salads came, something with figs and a bright sharp cheese, and the first thing all afternoon I actually wanted to eat, and the conversation folded politely around the table, and I did what I do. I asked Margaret about the drive up. I asked the man past Priya about the vineyard, which turned out to be the one thing he loved talking about. And I let him. I refilled the water glass of a nervous cousin 2 seats down before the staff could get to it, out of pure habit. And I caught Vivian watching me do it with an expression I couldn't name. And little by little, the family table did the thing family tables do around a good listener. It loosened. It forgot to guard itself. Even Gerald's Margaret laughed twice. It was going, I thought, almost too well. That was when Marcus and Chloe came back from the photographs, and Marcus, before he sat, lifted his champagne and tapped it once with a fork, and the whole lawn turned its 200 faces toward the head table like flowers tracking the sun. "Don't worry," Marcus said, to the laughter of the crowd. "This isn't the toast." Chloe would end me. "This is just a small thing. A host's privilege." He let the murmur settle. He was good at this, I saw. He knew exactly how long to hold a silence before it curdled. Most of you know that this firm, this life, all of it, it started with 2 people and 1 window that didn't open. He nodded, warm, generous, down the table. Vivian and I built something extraordinary once, and it takes a bigger person than people give me credit for to say that I'm genuinely, deeply glad she's here. That we can stand in a garden all these years later and wish each other well. He turned the full wattage of it on her. So, to old partners. And to new beginnings, for both of us. Viv, I hear congratulations are in order too. I truly could not be happier for you. The lawn made the warm collective sound a crowd makes at a graceful thing, glasses lifting, and it was flawless, and it was a trap, and I watched it close. Because a toast requires a response. And now 200 people were waiting, glasses raised, smiling, for Vivian Hale to stand in the seat of the accused and say something back, something about her new beginning, her engagement, the man beside her, extempore, unrehearsed, in front of the exact audience she'd armored against for a year. He'd handed her the microphone precisely so he could watch her drop it. I felt her breathe in beside me. I felt the tremor come up through the arm that had gone rigid against mine. And I did the only thing I know how to do, which is the thing I do for a customer who's ordered wrong in front of a line, who's turning red, who needs the room's attention moved somewhere kinder. I stood up first. "I'll take that one," I said, easy, rising with my glass. Because if I let her answer, she'll be gracious and modest, and you'll all go home thinking she's a reasonable woman, and I've only got the one evening to correct the record. A ripple of surprised laughter. Marcus's smile held, but his eyes came to me, recalculating again, that quick, cold arithmetic. "Most of you don't know me," I went on, and I let my ears do their thing, let the flush come. Because a man who blushes at his own toast is a man with nothing to hide. That's all right. 6 days ago, Vivian Hale didn't really know me either. She'll tell you she looked me up first, she looks everything up, it's a whole condition, but the truth is, she walked up to me on the worst kind of evening a person has. The kind where you'd rather do a hard thing alone than admit you'd rather not do it alone at all. I looked down at her. And I stopped performing, just for a second, because the truest thing was the one that would sell it. And she asked for help anyway, which, if you actually know her, is the bravest thing she does. She'd fight a wildfire single-handed before she'd ask a soul to pass her the water. So when people tell you Vivian Hale is impossible, too cold, too driven, too much, what they mean is she never once let them see her need anything. I raised the glass. I got to see it. It's the best thing about her. To Marcus and Chloe, thank you for the beautiful day. And to old stories finally getting a new narrator. There was a beat of silence, the good kind, the held kind, and then Margaret and her pearls said, "Oh, that's lovely," into it, helplessly, and the lawn broke into real applause, warmer than the applause Marcus had earned. And I sat down before my knees could betray me and reached for my water like a man who did this every day. Under the table, Vivian's hand found my wrist and gripped it hard, once, and let go. She didn't look at me. She was looking straight ahead, at Marcus, whose smile had finally, fractionally, slipped, and at Gerald beside him, who was not smiling at all, but studying me now with a wholly different quality of attention, the way you'd study a card that had turned up in a game you thought you controlled. "Well," Gerald said, into the last of the applause, so quietly that only our end of the table caught it. "How charming." He set down his glass. "Vivian, walk with me. They'll be cutting the cake in 20 minutes, and I find I'd rather see the vines while they're still light. Bring your remarkable young man." It wasn't a request. She rose. I rose. And we followed Gerald Vance out past the edge of the lights into the long gold evening and the rows of vines, away from the 200 witnesses, to hear whatever he had actually brought us out here to say. The path ran between the vines with the sun low and orange at the end of it, and the heat had finally begun to lean toward evening. The air going soft and thick with the smell of warm earth and crushed green, and somewhere the sweetness of overripe fruit dropped and forgotten between the rows. Cicadas ran their engine in the olive trees behind us. Gerald walked ahead with his hands clasped at the small of his back, unhurried. A man who had made people wait his whole life and had never once had to raise his voice to do it. "That was a fine toast," he said, without turning. "Genuinely, you have a gift, Mr. Marek. You made a room full of cynics feel something. That is not nothing. I've paid consultants a great deal of money to do less." "It wasn't a performance," I said. "I meant it. Of course you did. That's what makes it a gift and not a trick." He stopped at a place where the vines opened onto a view of the whole valley going amber, and he turned. And those pale eyes moved between the two of us with the patience of a man reading a document he'd already decided to sign or shred. "Which is why I'm going to be direct with you both, because I respect a thing that's real, even when it's inconvenient. Vivian, your refinancing package sits on my desk. 11 days. You know the number. You know the terms. You know that without my signature, the expansion loan calls all at once, and you spend the next 2 years dismantling the thing you spent 10 building." He said it the way another man might comment on the weather. "None of that is news to you." "No," Vivian said. Her voice was perfectly level. Only I, close enough to feel it, knew what it cost. "It isn't. Here is what may be. I came here tonight prepared to decline it." He let that sit, not for want of collateral. "Your numbers are sound. I came prepared to decline because I have watched you for 15 years be the most capable and the most alone person in every room you have ever entered. And a woman with nothing to lose but her company is a woman who will eventually gamble the company. It's a risk I've priced into you since you were 30. Solitary people are volatile people. Margaret will tell you I've turned down better numbers than yours over exactly that." He turned his gaze on me, and the cold in it had gone strangely thoughtful. "And then you brought him." The evening held its breath. A bird went over, low, calling once. "A man who wants nothing," Gerald said slowly. "No shares, no angle. I had my people check the moment you said the word fianc, you understand. I don't repeat things, I verify them, and there is genuinely nothing there. A cart, a lease. 3 years of exact change. A man who could take half of everything and instead make strangers feel that the lobby's about to be all right." His mouth moved, not a smile, something older than a smile. You have no idea what that's worth on a balance sheet, Vivian, and that's precisely why it's worth it. A settled woman is a stable risk. A loved woman is a bankable one. I find, standing in these vines, that I am prepared to sign after all. I felt the ground tilt. Beside me, Vivian had gone very still. Under one condition, Gerald said. There it is, I heard myself say. He inclined his head at me, almost approving. There it always is, Miss Marek. My condition is simple. I don't sign for a story that ends at the parking lot. I've watched too many of them. Next Saturday I host my annual thing at the house on the water. You know it, Vivian. You came for years. 200 people. The whole industry that watched Marcus leave and has spent a year deciding what it meant. His eyes moved between us. Patient, absolute. You'll come, both of you, as you are tonight, and you'll let all of them see what I just saw on that lawn. Do that, let me watch it hold up under a week's scrutiny and a room that's hunting for the seam, and the signature is yours Monday morning after. He paused, fail to appear, and let me see daylight through it, and I'll know the toast was a very fine performance after all, and I'll price you the way I always meant to. Solitary, volatile, declined. The sun touched the edge of the far hills. The whole valley went the deep gold of a thing about to be gone. And I understood, standing between the vines, that the sundown Vivian and I had promised each other. The sundown where the lie ended and I turned back into furniture had just been extended by exactly 1 week and one company's survival, and that neither of us had agreed to it, and that it no longer mattered whether we did. That's generous, Gerald, Vivian said, and her voice did not shake, and I have never in my life admired anyone more than in the second it didn't. I'll have to check Theo's, of course, Gerald said, already turning to walk back toward the lights. The matter closed in his mind the way matters closed in his mind, all at once and for good. Talk it over. Take the walk back. I'll tell them you wanted to see the sunset. It'll play beautifully. He paused and looked back over his shoulder, and for the first time all evening something almost human crossed the pale, patient face. For what it's worth, Mr. Marek, I hope it's real. I've watched her be needed by everyone and chosen by no one for 15 years. It would be a good thing if it were real. Then the cold slid back down like a blind. But my signature isn't hope. It's evidence. Bring me evidence. And he was gone, back down the road toward the false and glittering lights, leaving the two of us alone in the vines with the sun going down and the sighs of what had just happened settling over us in the cooling air. For a long moment, Vivian didn't speak. She stood facing the valley with the last light on her face, and her thumb was moving against the empty air where the glass had been, pressing at nothing, whitening at nothing, and when she finally turned to me, the CEO was gone, and there was only the tired woman from the tailor's shop who'd told me a true thing by accident. Theo. She started. Don't. I said it gently, but I said it. Don't do the thing where you fix it in your head before you say it out loud. I can see you doing it. You've already got a version of this, where you take it all on yourself and hand me a clean exit, and I need you to not, for 1 minute, because we're past the part where you decide things about my afternoon without me in the room. She flinched at that. It landed exactly where I'd aimed it, on the word she'd dropped in the rose garden without asking, and to her credit, she didn't reach for the armor. She let it land. You heard him, she said. It isn't an afternoon anymore. It's a week. It's a party at his house and 100 people who will be looking for the crack. And it's, her voice caught, that small, deep splinter catch. It's my whole company, Theo. It's 400 people who work for me who don't know their loan comes due in 11 days. I can't refinance without him. There's no other Gerald. I've spent a year building this expansion on the assumption that the money holds, and it holds if he signs, and he signs if she stopped. She made herself say it plainly, the way she'd made herself say, I panicked, if we keep pretending. For another week, in front of everyone. The cicadas roared and fell. The light was nearly gone from the valley now, the vines going blue-gray, and back toward the tables I could hear the harp starting up again and someone calling that they were cutting the cake. You want me to keep going? I said. No. She surprised me with it. That's the thing I got wrong up there in the garden. I'm not going to want it at you. I did that once today already. I made you my fiancé in front of 200 people because I couldn't stand to be small in front of him, and I have felt sick about it every hour since. She took a breath, and she did something I don't think came easily to her at all. She stopped selling. So I'm not going to tell you what I need. I'm going to tell you what it costs you, all of it, honestly. And then you get to decide, and if you decide to walk to that gate, I will drive you home myself and figure the rest out alone, because that is what I actually do. Her jaw tightened. It costs you a week of your life. It costs you being looked at by people like Gerald who will try to find the seam. It costs you your name in whatever Priya can't help telling. And it costs you the thing you told me on Tuesday you'd built and wouldn't give up. That 8 feet of the world where nobody owns you. Because for one more week, someone would. Me. She looked at me, and the last light caught the gray of her eyes, and there was no calculation left in them at all. That's the whole price. I finally know how to say it before, and not after. So, there it is. And there it was, the honest ledger, laid flat between us in the darkening vines. No script, no steer, no follow my lead. She'd done the one thing she'd promised at the tailor's she never could. She'd asked. I thought about my counter. I thought about the morning light coming low and gold across the marble, my 40 minutes of a lobby that belonged to nobody. The whole careful architecture of a life I'd built specifically so that no one could ever again write me into a story and then walk out of it, holding the pen. I thought about how the entire reason I'd said no on Tuesday was to protect exactly that, and how I'd said yes anyway, and how somewhere between the tailor's basil and a toast I hadn't planned to give, the protecting had quietly stopped being the point. 1 week, I said. Her breath went out of her. But this time we do it right, I said. And I stepped closer. Because this part I needed her to hear at counter range, quiet and even, the voice people strained toward. No more words dropped without me in the room. If we're going to sell a whole engagement to 100 sharks at Gerald's house, then you and I have to actually know each other by Saturday. Not the Versum, not the ledger, the real thing. The way people who are going to marry each other know each other. Which means I don't go back to being furniture on Monday. Not this week. This week you buy your Americano and you sit down at my counter like a person, and we build something true enough that we don't have to remember our lies. Because there won't be any. Everything about us will be real, except the size of the word on the invitation. I held out my hand, the same hand, the 3rd time now. That's my condition. You want a fiancé who holds up under a week of hunting? Then stop hiring me. Start knowing me. She looked at the hand. And then she did the thing she'd done off the elevator 6 days ago and at the tailor's and on the gravel this afternoon. Except this time she didn't hesitate over it. She took it, and her grip was cool and firm, and the tremor in it had gone. Not because she'd hidden it, but because for once she wasn't afraid of the drop. Deal, said Vivian Hale. And that would have been the whole of it. The two of us shaking hands in the blue dark of the vines, with a week and a company, and something neither of us had named yet stretched out between us, except that from the direction of the lights, from the edge of the arbor where the cake stood lit and waiting, a phone screen glowed, and lifted and pointed our way. I saw it a half-second too late. A small, bright rectangle, held up in the dusk, angled at exactly the moment my hand closed around Vivian's, and the last gold light framed the two of us alone between the rows like a photograph, staged by someone who wanted it to look like more than a handshake. The screen lowered, and behind it, stepping back into the shadow of the arbor before I could be certain, was a pale gray suit, and I heard. Carrying thin across the vines on the cooling air, Marcus Vance's voice, warm and pitched for no audience at all, saying to someone I couldn't see, "Send it to me. Just that one. I want to look at it properly." Vivian's hand went still in mine. "He photographed us," she said. "He photographed us," I agreed, and the cicadas roared up to fill the space where neither of us knew yet what that meant. Whether it was a man collecting a keepsake of a story he'd lost, or a man who had just decided the engagement was worth investigating after all, and had 1 week, exactly as we did, to find the seam and tear it open in front of the only person whose signature could save her. Across the dark lawn the lights blazed, and the harp spilled its silver, and someone laughed, and Marcus Vance slid his phone into his breast pocket and turned back toward his own wedding, and did not once look our way again, which frightened me more than anything he could have said. Monday came the way Mondays always came to the lobby. Early and gold and mine, the marble holding the nights cool a little longer, the light lying low across the floor in that long amber bar I'd have to myself for 40 minutes before the tide of lanyards came through the doors. I updated the chalkboard. I pulled a test shot and poured it out. And at 7:52, because the world had rearranged itself over one summer Saturday and forgotten to warn anyone, the elevator chimed on the wrong floor, and Vivian Hale stepped out in a linen suit the color of wet sand and walked toward my counter instead of the doors. She did not order a black Americano, exact change on the walnut. She pulled out the stool Nadia usually took, and she sat down on it like a woman lowering herself into cold water on purpose, and she said, "I don't actually know how to do this. Sit on a stool? It's mostly instinct. You've nearly got it. Be a person at a counter." She set her hands flat on the wood. "In this building, I am 40 floors of decisions. I don't know how to be someone who just buys a coffee and stays." Then that's lesson 1. I slid the portafilter home and pulled her shot, and the machine did its low good growl, and the smell of it bloomed up between us, dark and bittersweet. You buy the coffee. You stay. There's no part 2. That's the whole tragic simplicity of it. She almost smiled. That was the week, in one gesture, Vivian Hale learning, at 38, how to stay somewhere no one needed her to. We had 6 days to build a thing real enough to survive 100 people hunting for the seam, and we built it the only way I know how to build anything, which is early and slow and out of true small pieces. I learned she took her toast almost burned and apologized for it like a confession. She learned I closed the cart at exactly 6:40 because that was the minute the light left the lobby, and there was no point pretending after that. She told me about the 4th floor office with the window that didn't open. I told her about my mother and the loneliest people line, and watched her go very still over the rim of her cup. "That's the meanest true thing anyone said to me," she said, "the ones who've learned to never look it." She had a gift for the mean true thing. I get it honestly. On Wednesday, I tried to give the money back. I'd looked it up the way she looks everything up. The transfer had landed in my account the Thursday before the wedding. The full absurd fee, sitting there untouched like a coal I refused to hold. I turned my phone around on the walnut so she could see the number. Take it back. I told you Tuesday it was never about the money, and it's still sitting there, proving me honest. I haven't touched a cent. I'm not going to. She looked at the screen. Something moved behind her eyes I couldn't name. Keep it. Vivian, keep it. Her jaw set in that way I was starting to read like weather. Not as payment. I don't. I can't take it back, because taking it back would mean the only reason you're sitting across from me is the one you already refused, and I'd rather it sat in an account we both ignore than have that be true. She wrapped both hands around the cup. Leave it. Please. It's the least dishonest thing about the whole arrangement. So it stayed. A coal neither of us would hold, in an account neither of us would open. I did not know yet that it would end up being the most important thing in the room. Priya found me Thursday, appearing at the counter with the guilty radiance of a woman who had held a secret for 4 whole days and needed to be congratulated for it. I said nothing, she announced. To no one. I want that on my headstone. Priya, who knew the story of the century, and said nothing. She leaned in. But it's real now, right? Because I watched you two in those vines Saturday, and whatever that was, nobody's paying anybody to look like that. It's complicated, Priya. It's the good kind of complicated. I can tell. Your ears are doing the thing. She squeezed my arm and swept off toward the elevators, and I stood there with my ears betraying me exactly as advertised, and I understood that the lie had a problem, which was that it had quietly stopped being one and nobody had signed off on the change. Friday, the day before Gerald's, she came down at 6:40 and stayed past the leaving light, and we sat in the blue dusk of the emptied lobby, with the machine cooling and ticking behind me, and I finally asked the thing I'd been walking around all week. When this is over, when Gerald signs, and the company's safe, and there's no party left to survive. I turned my cup a quarter turn on the walnut. What happens to the 2 people who learned each other's coffee orders? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Outside, the heat still shimmered off the sidewalk, and a bus sighed past the glass, and the cicadas had started up somewhere in the planters. That thick summer drone that means the day won't cool for hours yet. I don't know how to want things out loud, she said. I've told you that. I know how to need, and I know how to win, and I've spent 15 years making sure nobody could tell the difference, including me. Her thumb pressed the edge of the counter. White, ask me again after Saturday. If there's anything left of us that isn't a performance for a man with a checkbook, I'll try to learn the words. That's the most I can honestly promise. I try to learn the words. That's a lot, I said. That's more than most people manage in a lifetime of Fridays. She looked at me then, really looked. And for one unguarded second, the whole careful architecture of her came down, and I saw straight through to the tired, brave thing underneath, and I thought, this is going to be the hardest sundown of my life. Gerald Vance's house sat on the water an hour east, low and long and pale against the last of a summer evening that refused to cool. The bay behind it going pink and then bronze as the sun let go of it. There were lanterns in the olive trees and a quartet on the terrace, and 200 people in linen and pale silk moving across a lawn that ran right down to a dock where boats knocked softly against their lines. The air smelled of salt and citronella and warm stone, and, threaded under it, the green mineral breath of the bay coming in off the water in slow waves. We arrived knowing each other. That was the difference. And I felt it the second we stepped onto the terrace. I didn't have to steer or perform or fill silence with invented history, because there wasn't any invention left. When a woman with an emerald the size of a grape asked how we met, I said, she buys her coffee where I work. It took her 3 years to learn my name and 6 days to introduce me as her fiancé. So you can see she's a woman who commits slowly and then all at once. And Vivian laughed, actually laughed, out loud at her own expense in front of a stranger, and I nearly dropped my glass, because I had never once heard her do it. You made a joke, I said quietly, as the emerald woman drifted off delighted. I did not. You did. Commit slowly, and then all at once was mine. But the laugh was real. I've got witnesses. The record shows Vivian Hale found something funny at 8:14 on a Saturday. Strike it from the record. Can't. It's load-bearing now. I steered us toward the water, 2 people with nowhere to be. This is the thing, Vivian. We stopped pretending sometime around Wednesday and forgot to tell the lawyers. She didn't answer that. But her hand found mine, and it wasn't for the audience, because no one was looking, and she laced her fingers through it the way you do a thing you've decided to want. Gerald watched us from the terrace steps the entire time, a glass of something amber untouched in his hand, and I understood we were passing. Hour by hour, room by room, we were passing his week of scrutiny, and I could see it in the slow thaw of his pale, patient face. A man revising a number downward, pricing in a thing he genuinely not believed he'd find. Which is exactly when Marcus Vance tapped a fork against a glass. He'd come without Chloe. She was home. Someone murmured, exhausted from the wedding, and he stood on the terrace steps beside his uncle, with a champagne flute and a face arranged into warmth, and the 200 faces turned toward him the way they'd turned in the rose garden. Flowers tracking the sun. "Forgive me, I know it's Gerald's night," Marcus said, easy, charming, pitch to carry. "I won't keep you from the good wine. I only wanted to say something, because I've been carrying it all week, and it doesn't sit right to hold it." He looked across the lawn, and he found us by the water, and he smiled. There's been a lovely story going round. That Vivian, our Vivian, who so many of us watched build something out of nothing, has finally found her person. And I wanted, in front of everyone who cares about her, to toast that. The lawn made its warm sound. Vivian's hand went rigid in mine. "Except," Marcus said, and the warmth stayed on his face while the temperature left it, "I've never in my life been able to leave a beautiful thing unexamined. It's a flaw, Viv will tell you, a ripple of indulgent laughter." So I had a look. Because I care. He drew a phone from his breast pocket, unhurried, and the screen glowed. This is a wire transfer. Dated the Thursday before my wedding. From Vivian Hale to a Mr. Theo Marek, who runs, and this is my favorite part, I want to get it right, an espresso cart in the lobby of her building. The amount is, frankly, generous for 6 days' work. He let it land. She didn't find her person. She hired one. For my wedding. And I only bring it up because I'd hate for 200 good people to keep toasting a receipt. The silence that came down over the lawn had a texture I felt on my skin, cold as the bay wind. Somewhere a boat knocked against the dock. The quartet had stopped between songs and did not start another. 200 faces turned, slow and terrible, from Marcus to us, to Vivian, standing at the edge of the water in storm-gray silk, with a hired man's hand in hers, caught, and I felt it happen. I felt her let go. Not of my hand, of herself. I'd spent a week learning her weather, and I watched the front come through, the shoulders squaring not into strength, but into something older, The chin lifting the way it lifts when a person has decided to take the blow standing because standing is the only dignity left them. Her thumb pressed my knuckles once, white, and I knew that press. It wasn't holding on, it was letting me off. "He's right," she said. She said it clearly, into the awful quiet in the level voice she used to read terms off a contract, and it carried all the way up the lawn to the terrace steps. I paid him. Everything Marcus said is true. I stood in my lobby 6 days ago, and I offered a stranger money to walk into a wedding so I wouldn't have to walk in alone. Because I could not stand, her voice did not shake, and that was the worst of it. I could not stand for all of you to see that I had no one to ask. So I bought someone. That's who I am. Marcus has been telling you for a year, and here at last is your proof. Her hand loosened from mine, finger by finger, deliberate. "Theo, you can go. You've more than earned it. And I'm sorry. I did this to you too. Go home." The old belief had won. I could see it sitting behind her eyes, vast and calm and certain. The lie she'd built a whole company around, that she was a woman to be needed and never chosen. That everything she touched turned into a transaction, because she was, at the root of her, only ever a transaction herself. Marcus had not exposed a lie. He'd handed her the thing she'd believed her whole life and let her say it out loud, and she was thanking him for it by agreeing. The lawn waited. Gerald, on the steps, set down his amber glass with the small, final click of a man closing a file. Solitary, volatile, declined, and I did the thing I know how to do. I did not let go of her hand, first of all. She'd loosened her fingers, but I kept mine, gently, the way you keep hold of a cup someone's trying to set down before they've finished. And then I turned to face the 200 people the way I'd turned to face the frozen faces in the rose garden a week ago, and I let my ears go red, because a man who blushes has nothing to hide, and I raised my voice just enough to reach the steps. "That's a good document, Marcus." I nodded at the phone, still glowing in his hand. "Really thorough. You should show them the second page." The smile on his face stayed exactly where it was. "There isn't a second page," I went on, so I'll narrate it. "That transfer landed in my account 8 days ago, and if you scroll, you love a document. Your uncle told me, you audit people for sport. You'll find there is not one single withdrawal against it. Not a coffee. Not a cent. It's still sitting there tonight, every dollar of it, because I told her in that lobby, before I ever said yes, that I wasn't for sale. And I meant it. And she couldn't take the money back, because taking it back would have meant admitting the only reason I stood beside her was the money, and neither of us could stand for that to be true. I looked around the silent lawn. So yes, she offered to pay me. And I refused, and then I spent a week finding out who she actually is under all the armor you people gave her, and I'll tell you what I found, since we're all being so thorough tonight. I turned to Vivian. She was staring at me, and the certainty behind her eyes had cracked, and underneath it was something raw and disbelieving, and afraid to hope. I found a woman who'd rather chew glass than ask a soul to pass her the water, I said, only to her now, though the whole lawn strained to hear it, because the quietest voice in a fight is the one people lean toward. Who learned before she was grown that love was a performance review and built a fortress so no one could grade her again. Who paid a stranger to stand next to her, not because she's cold, because she was so sure, so bone sure, that if she asked anyone to do it for free, they'd say no. My voice didn't shake either. You wanted proof it isn't real, Marcus. Here's your proof. A real fiancé would have let me lie for her just now. She just stood in front of 200 people who despise her and told the truth that ruins her. To set me free, because somewhere this week, without either of us signing off on it, she started caring more about what happens to me than what happens to her company. That's not a receipt. I don't know what you'd call it. Where I come from, we don't have a colder word for it than love. Nobody breathed. The bay came in against the dock, once, soft. The money's untouched, I said. But she's not, and neither am I. And then I did the thing that cost me the 8 feet of the world I'd sworn I'd never trade. I let go of her hand. And I got down on one knee on Gerald Vance's lawn in a borrowed blue jacket that fit too well, in front of everyone, with nothing in my pockets and nothing to gain, and no ring, because there had never been a ring. And I looked up at Vivian Hale. So let's make the lie honest, I said. Marry me. Not for a garden, not for a signature, not so anybody at this party revises a number. Marry me, because you learned my coffee order in 6 days, and I learned yours in 3 years, and somewhere in the difference is the whole strange shape of us. You told me Friday you'd try to learn the words. You don't have to. I'll say them for both of us until you catch up. My ears were on fire. I'm not for sale, Vivian, but I'd give myself away for free. I already have. I just hadn't found a lawn to do it on. For a moment, the certainty and the fear and the 15 years of armor all warred behind her eyes at once, and I watched her at the edge of the water with the bronze light going off the bay behind her, and I thought, this is it. This is the sundown. Whatever she says now is the whole rest of both our lives. She got down on the grass in front of me, storm gray silk and all, so we were eye to eye, so the 200 people couldn't be part of it anymore, so it was just us, the way it had been in the vines. I don't want the signature, she said, low, only to me. Gerald, her voice caught. That deep, small splinter catch. Gerald, I withdraw the package. All of it. I'll refinance somewhere else, or I'll lose the expansion, or I'll dismantle the whole thing floor by floor. I don't care. I'm not buying a man's approval of us with a performance. I'm done performing. I'm so tired of performing. She was crying now and not hiding it, and I had never once seen her not hide anything. I'd rather lose the company than have anyone think this was ever for 1 second about the company. That's me wanting something out loud. How did I do? That was perfect, I said, my own voice gone to gravel. That was the best one anyone's ever done. Yes, she said, and it wasn't to the crowd, it was to me, to the question I was still holding out between us on my knees in the grass. The word, Theo, yes, marry me. Buy your coffee where I work, and I'll learn to be a person at your counter, and we'll argue about the season for the rest of our lives. A wet, disbelieving laugh got out of her. Autumn. I want autumn. Nobody looks good shivering in a photograph. Vivian, autumn, she said again, fierce and streaming and radiant, and you'll suffer through it, because you love me. And it wasn't a question, and I answered it anyway, with the truest thing I own, which is a warm hand and a steady voice, and nowhere else on earth I'd rather stand. I don't remember who started the applause. I know it wasn't Marcus. When I finally got my feet back under me and pulled Vivian up with me into the noise of a lawn that had gone, in the space of one confession, from a hunting ground to a wedding of its own, I looked for him on the terrace steps, and the smile was gone at last, wiped clean, and there was a man underneath it I almost felt for. A man who'd spent a year needing to be told he'd been the one who left something remarkable, and had just watched, in real time, the thing he told everyone was unlovable get chosen out loud in front of the whole industry. He turned the phone face down in his hand. He didn't say anything else. There was nothing left in the document to read. It was Gerald who came down the steps. He crossed the lawn slowly, through the parting crowd, that dry, patient face unreadable, and he stopped in front of us, and he looked at Vivian for a long moment with those pale eyes that had priced her since she was 30. "You withdrew the package," he said. "I did, in front of 200 people. Costing yourself, by my rough count, an expansion, a very good year, and possibly the firm." He nodded slowly. "For a man on his knees in the grass with an untouched account and no second page." Something moved in the back of those cold eyes, the small door onto the cold room swinging shut for good. "I told you in the vines, Vivian, my signature isn't hope, it's evidence." He reached into his linen jacket and drew out a folded paper. The package, the refinancing, carried in his own pocket all night, and he held it out to her across the space between us. "You've just handed me the only evidence that was ever worth anything. A woman who'd throw the company into the water rather than let a lie stand isn't a volatile risk, my dear. She's the safest bet I've made in a decade." His mouth moved, and this time it was almost warm. "It's signed." It was signed before Marcus opened his mouth. "I only wanted to see what you'd do when you thought it wasn't. Take it. Go be a person at his counter." He pressed the paper into her hand and turned to me and inclined his head the fraction of an inch he'd refused it a week ago. "Mr. Marek, I'm rarely wrong about people. I was wrong about the shape of you, and I find I don't mind. Look after her. She's better than the room ever let her be." Then he was gone, back up toward the terrace and the amber glass and the whole industry that would by Monday be telling a different story than the one Marcus had planned, and Vivian stood in the lantern light by the water with a signed company in one hand and my hand in the other. And she started to laugh and cry at the same time in a way that undid me completely. "You unengaged us and re-engaged us inside 4 minutes," she said. "On your knees, in front of Gerald Vance. I contain multitudes. Also, I've lost all feeling in the knee, so this had better be forever." "It's forever," she said, "and it wasn't performance, and there was no one left to perform for anyway. Theo, what's your middle name? I'm marrying you, I get to know now." "After the toasts," I said. "I'm still saving it. We were married in the autumn, because she'd earned autumn. It was small, a garden that was ours and not anyone's ex's, gone gold at the edges. The first cold snap holding off just long enough that no one shivered in the photographs. Nadia cried and pretended it was allergies. Priya gave a toast that started 4 cortados a week for a year, and he never said a word and ended somewhere none of us could see through, and afterward told anyone who'd listen that she'd known before we did, which was true. Gerald sent a case of wine from the vines we'd walked between, and a card that said only, in a dry old hand, "Evidence accepted." And on the ordinary Tuesdays, which are the ones that turn out to matter, this is how it goes. The lobby of the Hale and Vance building still holds the nights cool a little longer than the street. The light still comes in low and gold across the marble for 40 minutes before the tide of lanyards, and I still have those 40 minutes. My 8 feet of the world, the chalkboard in handwriting my mother would have called a crime. Nobody owns me. That was never the thing I had to protect, it turns out. The thing was letting someone in without letting them take the pen. At 7:52, the elevator chimes on the wrong floor, and she steps out, not in armor, most days, just a woman coming down to buy a coffee and stay. She sets exact change on the walnut the way she has for years. But now, when I slide the cup across, she puts her hand over mine on the wood and doesn't move it, and holds on in front of the whole waking building. Because she finally learned that the loneliest people are the ones who taught themselves never to look it, and then, one gold morning at a time, unlearned it. Black Americano, she says. No sugar. I know your order, I tell her. I've known it for years. I know you have. Her thumb moves over my knuckles, warm, unhurried, nothing to hide. That was always the tell. Real love doesn't always announce itself across a rose garden or a boardroom or a checkbook. Sometimes it's been standing at the counter the whole time, pouring the same cup every morning, waiting for you to learn its name. If this story warmed something in you, if you know the ache of a guarded heart and the quiet mercy of being chosen anyway, stay a while here with us. There are more stories like this one waiting, more gardens and counters and second chances, and I'd love for you to hear them. Subscribe, settle in, and let the next one keep you company. Until then, be gentle with the guarded ones. Sometimes they've only been waiting all this time for someone to learn their order and stay.